Rome 98 AD. Beneath the marble floors of the baths of Agrippa, fire breathes from the underworld. The imperial guards push through choking smoke. Men in fine togas scream, clawing at the exits of the latrine, marble benches now glowing red from heat. One senator collapses, half his robe aflame, his hand still clutching the golden ring that marked his rank. In the corner, a young slave stares, motionless, ash on his face, a sponge stick burning in his hand. His name is Marcus Septimus, latrine attendant, invisible to history. Until this moment. They would later say the gods were angry that Cloaca, the goddess of sewers, had opened a gate to Hades beneath the city. But the truth was stranger, and far more human. To understand why a toilet became a death trap, why a slave was blamed for a senator's death, and how the story of Rome's underworld mirrors the empire above, we must go back 3 days, into the stench, the superstition, and the secrets of Rome's greatest invention, its sewers. Everything you're about to hear comes from Roman engineers' records, graffiti, and letters preserved beneath the city itself. This isn't legend, it's what they left behind. Now here's where we need to pause. When most people think of the Roman Empire, they picture marble forums, emperors in purple, the thunder of legions. But Rome's true heartbeat was below all that, in the darkness. The Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, ran for miles under the city, carrying away waste, runoff, and the hidden evidence of daily life. And attached to it, like organs to arteries, were hundreds of public latrines, social, political, and religious spaces where citizens met, traded gossip, and performed the most human of acts side by side. In that world worked men like Marcus, slaves, laborers, and cleaners, people who kept the empire clean while living in its filth. It was here, in places like this, that Rome's contradictions were most visible. Clean marble, foul purpose, sacred ritual, unspeakable odor, public conversation, private shame. And it was here that a chain of small decisions, neglect, greed, superstition, would lead to the fire that killed a senator and nearly destroyed the baths of Agrippa. But before the flames, there was routine, a daily rhythm older than any emperor. The scraping of sandals on stone, the murmur of voices echoing off marble, the trickle of water carrying away what Rome preferred not to see. 3 days earlier, Marcus woke before dawn to the smell of vinegar and salt water, the tools of his trade. He was 17, property of the bath complex, tasked with cleaning the public latrines used by hundreds of citizens each morning. It was, by Roman standards, a respectable post for a slave, indoors, near running water, protected from the sun. But it also placed him at the threshold between the living and the damned, for Romans believed that demons lurked in the drains, hungry for the breath of men. And on that morning, the drains had begun to whisper. As pockets, modern archaeologists know them as methane and hydrogen sulfide, deadly, invisible, explosive. But to Romans, these were signs of divine displeasure. When the fetid air hissed through the benches, they said Cloaca was speaking. Marcus had heard the stories, how workmen disappeared in the tunnels, how the smell of sulfur was the breath of Pluto. Yet orders were orders. The previous day, a wealthy merchant had complained that the air in the latrine reeked of the underworld. Marcus's overseer told him to descend into the maintenance shaft and silence the goddess. He carried with him only a lamp, a bucket of vinegar, and the tersorium, the sponge on a stick, symbol of his servitude. What he found below would begin the chain that ended in fire. If you're finding this unsettling, imagine this. Every emperor, every senator, every citizen of Rome, from slaves to generals, sat on these benches. This was where gossip became rumor, rumor became policy, and policy sometimes became death. The empire ran on marble and blood, but it also ran on plumbing. And that's what most people don't realize. Rome's glory depended not only on armies and law, but on a network of waste channels so advanced that parts of it still function today. Yet beneath that engineering triumph lay fear, ritual, and neglect. And it was neglect, by man, not God, that would soon ignite the latrine. 3 days earlier, the baths of Agrippa shimmered like a marble jewel at the heart of Rome. Steam rose from its domed halls, gilded ceilings reflected the early sun, and thousands of citizens, rich and poor alike, poured through its archways each morning. They came not just to bathe, but to talk, trade, and be seen. In an empire obsessed with appearances, cleanliness was status. Yet behind every polished mosaic and perfumed chamber stood men like Marcus, unseen, unmentioned, but indispensable. His shift began before sunrise. when the marble was still cool and the latrines still quiet. The public latrine was attached to the bath's south wing, a vaulted room lined with 20 marble benches, each carved with smooth oval openings. Beneath them ran a steady flow of water, fed by the aqueducts, carrying waste to the Cloaca Maxima. In front of the benches, another narrow channel carried cleaner water, where men rinsed the tersorium, the sponge stick used instead of cloth. It was communal, reused, rinsed in vinegar or salt, a ritual of sanitation that modern minds can barely comprehend. But in Rome, it was more than plumbing. It was community. Senators and shopkeepers sat side by side, gossiping about politics, debating theater, or whispering about the emperor's latest decree. The latrine was a place of strange equality, at least for a few minutes a day. And Marcus, silent with his cleaning tools, heard everything. That afternoon, the bath's overseer, a freedman named Publius Crispus, ordered a small ritual. The engineers had reported strange vapors. Rather than send for plumbers, they summoned a priest of Cloacina, goddess of the sewers. Cloacina's cult dated back to Rome's founding, when the Cloaca Maxima had been seen as a sacred river beneath the streets. She was half divine, half domestic, the guardian of purity and filth, the line between civilization and chaos. Her small shrine stood beside the forum, built near the ancient sewer mouth. But her worshippers, mostly workers and superstitious tradesmen, still performed offerings when pipes gurgled or drains stank. Marcus watched as the priest sprinkled perfumed oil into the drain, murmuring words lost to time. He lowered a small bronze charm, a tiny phallus, symbol of fertility and protection, into the channel. The crowd chuckled, but Crispus crossed himself. Even Rome's rational minds feared what lurked beneath. Then came the first warning. A bubble rose from the sewer grate, the size of a man's head, shimmering with rainbow film. It burst, and half the torches in the room went out. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the priest whispered, "The goddess breathes." Here's where we need to pause. To modern science, the event is simple: a sudden surge of trapped methane released from organic decay deep within the tunnels. But to Romans, such things carried meaning. The world of the unseen, gods, spirits, omens, was not separate from the physical. A smell, a sound, a flicker of flame, these were messages from the divine. And that belief shaped how they lived, how they built, and how they ignored danger when faith provided an easier answer. That evening, Marcus cleaned the benches long after sunset. He poured vinegar water through the channels, humming to drown the echoing drips. But beneath the hum, he heard something new, a faint metallic clatter from the maintenance shaft. When he peered inside, he saw light, not the wavering glow of a lamp, but the steady flicker of a brazier. Someone was working below, at night, without permission. He called softly. No answer. The sound ceased. And then, silence. The next morning, the air in the latrine felt heavier. Even the water trickling beneath the benches ran slower. Crispus cursed the engineers. "Lazy men cutting corners," he said. But the engineers claimed the water flow had been fine the night before. Somewhere beneath the baths, the Cloaca Maxima's arteries were clogging, and no one wanted to descend again to find out why, except Marcus. That afternoon, as the baths emptied, Marcus slipped into the maintenance corridor. The smell was stronger now, like rotten eggs and heat. He lit his oil lamp and followed the narrow steps down, hand trailing the damp stone wall. At the bottom lay a low tunnel, one of Rome's thousands of secondary drains feeding into the main sewer. He crouched, moving carefully. Rats fled at his approach. And then he saw it. A section of the flow channel had been partially blocked with rubble and shards of marble. Recently, deliberately. Among the debris, he found something glinting, a bronze coin wedged into a crack, stamped with the profile of Emperor Trajan, newly minted, gleaming, untouched by corrosion. Someone had been working here within the past day. But why? Marcus didn't know it yet, but he had found the first trace of a scandal that ran deeper than the sewer itself, one that would soon claim lives. A scheme of corruption, shortcuts, and negligence hiding behind religion and superstition, a mirror of the empire's rot, perfectly literal. He pocketed the coin and climbed back toward the surface, unaware that his discovery had already marked him. Above ground, the priest of Cloacina had told the overseer, "The goddess is angry. A sacrifice must be made." And in Rome, sacrifice rarely meant animals. The next morning, the sky above Rome was heavy with clouds, and the baths smelled faintly of smoke, though no fire burned. Marcus was summoned before the overseer, Publius Crispus, whose face was tight with anger. Someone had complained. The priests claimed that the goddess demanded purification, and Marcus, who had dared to enter the tunnels unblessed, was to perform it, a punishment disguised as duty. He was ordered to descend again, this time deeper, through the lower access shaft, into the belly of the Cloaca Maxima itself. It was there, the priest said, that the spirit of corruption needed to be appeased. Crispus pressed a small clay amulet into Marcus's hand. For luck, he said, though he didn't meet his eyes. And for Rome. The Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, was one of Rome's oldest and proudest constructions. Built centuries earlier, when kings still ruled the city, it was vast enough for a man to stand upright within. Brick, stone, and cement fused by genius and sweat, a triumph of engineering. And yet, for all its glory, it smelled of death. The air was warm, thick with ammonia, methane, and rot. Every sound echoed endlessly, as if the tunnels themselves were alive. Marcus descended with 2 companions, slaves from the Foracarii, the sewage maintenance corps, men whose entire lives were spent beneath Rome, unseen and unthanked. Their leader was Gaius Varro, a former legionary who'd lost his left eye in Dacia. He'd been sold into sewer work to pay a gambling debt. His voice, low and gravelly, carried easily over the dripping water. What began as superstition now became survival. Marcus learned quickly, never trust still water, never scrape walls with your hands, never, ever snuff your flame. The air pockets could ignite without warning. Roman engineers knew this, but preferred to call it divine wrath, because gods were easier to blame than negligence. They moved slowly, inspecting the channel walls. And soon they found what Marcus had seen before, rubble blocking the flow. Gaius frowned. He prodded the debris with a rod. It wasn't random. It was packed deliberately. Marble chunks, broken amphorae, even a few coins. Someone had sealed part of the flow tunnel. Here's where we need to pause. Most people imagine Rome's aqueducts and sewers as public works of civic pride, and they were. But they were also business. Contracts to build and maintain them were awarded to wealthy citizens who pocketed vast sums from the treasury. If they could cut corners, reuse bricks, block secondary channels, skip repairs, they did. And in this case, someone had tampered with the flow to redirect water to a private bathhouse nearby, starving the public latrine of cleansing water. The result? Gas buildup, stagnation, a time bomb beneath the city. Marcus and the others cleared what they could, working by torchlight, but with every shovel of debris removed, bubbles rose through the water, bursting with oily smoke. Gaius cursed. Hay pressed on. By dusk, their oil was nearly gone. Gaius ordered the others to turn back. Marcus stayed, determined to clear one last blockage. That's when he found it, wedged beneath a broken arch, a wooden crate, half buried in sludge. Inside, fragments of marble and a bronze plaque, stamped with the mark of Lucius Norbanus, chief contractor of the baths. Proof of corruption. Marcus barely had time to comprehend what he held when the air changed. The tunnel went still. Too still. Then came the hiss. The hiss became a roar, a sudden wave of hot wind sweeping through the tunnel, knocking Marcus backward. His lamp flickered, then died. He plunged into darkness. Gaius's voice echoed faintly. Move! Upstream! Now! Marcus scrambled through knee-deep water, clutching the plaque. Behind him, faint orange light pulsed. Fire somewhere in the depths. He ran, lungs burning, until he saw daylight glimmer through a maintenance grate. He emerged, gasping, reeking of filth and fear. The Foracarii sealed the shaft behind him. They all knew what that glow meant, a small ignition. Not yet catastrophic, but close. One wrong torch, one careless spark. Rome's underworld was ready to explode. When Marcus reported what he'd found, the blocked tunnels, the stolen water, the plaque, the overseer refused to listen. Crispus tore the bronze piece from his hands and slapped him across the face. You accuse a Roman citizen? You, a slave? He claimed Marcus had fabricated the story to hide his own negligence. The priest of Cloaca agreed. The real cause, they insisted, was sacrilege. Someone had offended the goddess. And so, the investigation ended where all Roman guilt did, in ritual. A sacrifice was planned, an offering to purify the air. Here's what most people don't realize. The Romans didn't separate faith from engineering. They blessed aqueducts, consecrated latrines, prayed before sewer maintenance. When disaster struck, divine blame was convenient. It preserved reputations. It kept the machine running. Marcus's truth was inconvenient. It threatened power, money, and comfort. So it was buried, like everything else, beneath Rome. 2 nights later, Marcus was again sent below, this time alone, officially to complete purification, unofficially to silence him. He descended with a single oil lamp and a handful of incense sticks meant to appease Cloacina. He tied the amulet Crispus had given him around his wrist. As he walked, he whispered a prayer, not to the goddess, but to anyone listening. "If I must die, let me die clean." He reached the chamber where he'd found the crate. The air shimmered like heat on desert sand. He knew it instantly. Too much gas. His skin prickled. He turned to leave. Above, faintly, he heard laughter. The bath's evening crowd had arrived. The latrine would soon be full. He shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the echo. He began to climb. Halfway up, the lamp flame wavered, then steadied, then flared. The explosion that followed shook the south wing of the Baths of Agrippa to its foundations.